Another closed-door meeting was once again held by Ruben Amorim in the room reserved only for conversations that cut deep with honesty. Last time, the one called out was Garnacho, and the message was cold enough to silence the entire room. Find yourself another team. This time, the name that echoed was Manuel Ugarte. The Uruguayan midfielder didn't deserve to be dismissed like his Argentine junior. But he still had to face an order that would make any player uneasy. Amorim didn't mince his words. He looked Ugarte straight in the eye and told him he was no longer himself, no longer the player he once was at Sporting Lisbon. A sentence that cut like a knife, yet sounded like a wake-up call. Everyone knows Ugarte is the kind of player who fights with his heart, his sweat, and every sliding tackle, but when the very coach who once elevated him now speaks those words so bluntly, it's clear the problem runs deeper than just form. This is the story of a man once seen as the soul of midfield play, now lost within the very system that once celebrated him. And that, perhaps, is the deepest pain a footballer can endure. Barely 2.5 years ago, he was one of Europe's most sought-after prospects. Now, it's almost ironic. The problem speaks for itself. Perhaps no one is more disappointed than Ugarte himself. In just 3 short years, he's gone from the summit to the pit. Truly, one of Manchester United's most disappointing signings in recent seasons has been Manuel Ugarte. What's strange, though, is that the media rarely talk much about him, not because he's been good, but because he's failed to evoke any emotion at all. Players who get criticized or mocked are usually those who once shone brightly, who made fans fall in love before letting them down. Since the day he set foot at Old Trafford, Ugarte has been like a faint background tune, not bad enough to anger anyone, but never memorable either. Since joining the club for £50.5 million, Ugarte hasn't had a single truly convincing match. At best, he's been steady, doing his job but never making a difference. In a team desperate for a midfielder who can command the center, dictate tempo, and unlock attacks, Ugarte has only offered a level of safety that borders on dull. Stats from the match against Manchester City show he made just 4 forward passes in 71 minutes, 3 of which failed, and lost possession 7 times. Concerning numbers for someone at the heart of midfield. What's worse, even Ugarte himself knows he's underperforming. He's admitted that his Premier League start has been below standard and fears losing his spot under Ruben Amorim if he doesn't improve. The Guardian even described him as a car running without its auxiliary engine, still moving, but painfully sluggish. Tribal Football went further, mocking that he's a wet blanket draped over Manchester United's tempo, heavy, lifeless, slowing everything around him. Of course, Ugarte isn't a bad player. At Sporting Lisbon, he was one of Europe's top ball winners, so impressive that both Chelsea and PSG fought fiercely for his signature. But the Premier League is another world, one that demands not just destroyers but also creators. And that's where Ugarte has struggled most. When Manchester United spent almost as much as Arsenal did for Declan Rice, only to receive a limited edition version of Casemiro, disappointment became inevitable, no matter the excuses. He may still have time to adapt and rediscover that warrior spirit he once had in Lisbon. But if his form continues to stay flat, Manuel Ugarte may soon become yet another example of the kind of signing Manchester United have made far too often in recent years: expensive, yet forgettable. So, can we now call Manuel Ugarte a failed signing for Manchester United? With a transfer fee of £50.5 million, the question is fair, because that's far from a small number. When Ugarte first arrived at Old Trafford, expectations were sky high, a midfielder once praised as one of Europe's finest ball winners. But things didn't unfold as hoped. Under Erik ten Hag, Ugarte was almost hidden away in those early weeks, only getting regular minutes after nearly 10 matches. And that's when the doubts began. He played without confidence, slowed the team's rhythm, and seemed completely unprepared for Premier League intensity, something unacceptable for a holding midfielder. That very issue reminded United's management why Luis Enrique once excluded Ugarte from his plans at PSG. The Spanish coach was determined to find another midfielder, specifically João Neves, because he believed Ugarte was too limited in his ability to progress the ball. Indeed, the Uruguayan's fatal weakness lies in his passing range and line-breaking ability. He rarely delivers accurate passes to the flanks, and even more rarely initiates attacks with any real sense of creativity or incision. The real problem is that if he can't pass well, Ugarte should at least excel in his old strengths: tackling, intercepting, reading the game. Yet in the Premier League, even those have faltered. His tackles are mistimed, weak, or simply a step too slow. The instincts and explosiveness that once made him a midfield warrior at Sporting Lisbon have now become his undoing in England. When compared to Casemiro, the contrast becomes even clearer. Both play as defensive midfielders and rely heavily on physicality. But Casemiro still shows his class through his reading of the game and tackling, only limited by age and stamina. Ugarte, on the other hand, though younger and fitter, lacks composure in crucial duels. Under Erik ten Hag, it's fair to say Ugarte never truly adapted to the tempo and demands of English football. Though he was expected to learn from Casemiro and develop, he has remained stagnant. To be fair, this is still the early stage of his journey at Old Trafford. There's time to change. But if things continue as they are, Ugarte could well become yet another expensive signing that leaves no mark in the post-Ten Hag era. When Erik ten Hag's reign ended and the managerial seat was handed to Ruben Amorim, Ugarte's former mentor, fans believed it would mark a turning point in the Uruguayan's career. Everyone expected Ugarte to rediscover the form he once showed at Sporting Lisbon, where he was an irreplaceable cog in Amorim's system. Same philosophy, same drills, same tactical structure. There seemed no reason why Ugarte couldn't shine again. In fact, when Amorim took charge, he immediately reinstated his familiar 3-4-2-1 formation, with two central midfielders shielding the back three, almost a carbon copy of his Sporting setup. Within that system, Ugarte was entrusted with a key role. Casemiro was aging and unable to maintain high intensity, and United lacked quality depth in midfield, so placing faith in Ugarte made perfect sense. With a coach who knew every detail of his movements, pressing habits, and limitations, many expected at least a revival, if not a complete rebirth. But what happened next showed that reuniting with an old mentor doesn't always guarantee rediscovery. Let's flip the perspective. If Manuel Ugarte is no longer the player he once was at Sporting, perhaps Ruben Amorim is no longer the same all-powerful coach either. Everything at Manchester United, from the squad quality to the playing environment and team structure, is vastly different from the Sporting side that Amorim and Ugarte once ran like a perfectly synchronized machine. Looking at United's current midfield combinations, there are roughly three variants: Bruno with Casemiro, Manuel with Ugarte, and occasionally Casemiro with Ugarte or Bruno with Ugarte. At first glance, that seems flexible, but it's easy to see which pairing works, and which doesn't. The worst combination is Ugarte alongside Bruno Fernandes, while the most effective is Ugarte with Casemiro. The reason is simple: Bruno plays with extreme freedom, roaming across the pitch, abandoning his position to chase the ball and create chances. That very freedom leaves Ugarte, a player who relies on structure and spacing, completely lost. Time and again, he seems unsure where to stand, whether to press or drop, because Bruno's movement leaves huge gaps in midfield. When paired with Casemiro, however, Ugarte looks far more comfortable. He can move proactively and hunt the ball, while Casemiro sits deeper as an anchor. That partnership faintly resembles the setup Amorim used at Sporting Lisbon, with Ugarte playing deeper and Jaime Morita acting as the tempo setter, coordinator, and ball winner. The issue is, there's no true Morita in United's current squad. Both Bruno and Manuel are technically gifted but lack Morita's defensive awareness and ball-winning ability. It's not about quality, but about style. Amorim is trying to recreate an old formula in a completely different context, and that's why both he and Ugarte are trapped in the shadow of the past. I don't think Manchester United will sell Manuel Ugarte anytime soon, given their current shortage of central midfielders, and even plans to recruit another one in the upcoming winter transfer window. Offloading a fit, physically reliable player like Ugarte would be costly, risky, and short-sighted. However, in the long run, the problem lies elsewhere. As Manchester United evolve toward a more dynamic, fluid, and creative midfield, a purely defensive midfielder like Ugarte could become a misfit. A player strong in duels, tackles, and safe ball circulation, but lacking in press resistance and progressive vision, will struggle to survive in a system that increasingly values technical skill and tactical intelligence. In other words, Ugarte may remain in the present, but his future at Old Trafford is a major question mark. as the club aims to climb higher and embrace a more modern style. Players like him, no matter how hardworking, may gradually be left behind. A perfect example is none other than his former Sporting teammate, who was once essential but has since been cast aside at Bayern and now finds himself at Tottenham.